The date is October 1813. Napoleon's war in Spain would end in a French defeat, and the Spanish would cross the French border. It wasn't good in Germany either, as the Kingdom of Bavaria would stop the coalition, and also because Napoleon's army was being pinned in the Kingdom of Saxony at the town of Leipzig. Napoleon told his southern flank to meet up with him, but the Russians caught them at the Battle of LEIPZIG. Napoleon would then meet up at his southern flank, and the Allies would close in for the kill. Both sides would meet at the town of Leipzig. Napoleon had a force of 185,000 men, with his northern flank being controlled by Marshal Michael Ney. The coalition had a force of 320,000 men, most of which hadn't arrived at the battle yet. The coalition would start the battle off by bombarding the French line, and then advancing their infantry to confront them. The coalition would push part of the French force back, but due to cannon fire they could not advance. That was when French forces fought back and pushed the coalition backwards. And then a fight happened between Prussian soldiers and Polish soldiers, and the Austrians advanced on the left flank. And then on the far right flank, the coalition launched an all-out attack, outnumbering the French army, pushing them back. But the French received reinforcements. The French would reinforce their positions, and the French would attack the coalition, pushing them back. It was then on the far left flank the Austrians would try their hand at an all-out attack. They outnumbered the French, and so the French fortified their position. It wasn't looking good for either side in the south. But in the north, the Prussians and the Russians were making good progress, pushing the French back and attacking one of the fortified towns. With his army being pressed on all sides, Napoleon knew he would need to spring an attack. Napoleon gathered his men on his southern center. He had plans for an all-out attack, but was about to execute it. He bombarded the coalition's line with cannonball, and his infantry advanced. It was at this time Marshal Murat would take out the cavalry and advance with the infantry, charging the coalition's line. As Marshal Murat destroyed the coalition, his men grew tired and needed a break. That was when the coalition received reinforcements and the Russian Guard cavalry pushed the cavalry back. The French were pushed back and had to retreat. But part of the French forces held out at a small town, but soon were overwhelmed and had to retreat. It was then that the Austrians sprung an attack on the left flank and pushed part of the French forces back. Up in the north, the French were being overwhelmed and pushed back on all fronts. The Prussians led a cavalry charge and rerouted the French lines. The French retreated. Not much would happen on day 2 of the battle. Napoleon would receive reinforcements from the north, and the Russians led an attack, pushing the French forces back, and led a cavalry charge, rerouting their cavalry. Napoleon would receive reinforcements that day, but the coalition would receive plenty more reinforcements. Some from the bottom, some from the right, and some from the north, which was unguarded by Napoleon. He knew that this was going to be the battle of the nations. On day 3, Napoleon compacted his army into a tight formation easily defendable. Napoleon told part of his army to cover his retreat. The coalition would then spring an attack on the south, crushing the thin French lines. The French had to reinforce, and they crushed the Austrians right back. And then, the Russians and Prussians advanced, threatening the French lines. They advanced on all sides. They completely crushed the outnumbered French, and they had to pull back. Up in the north, Marshal Bernadottes' army finally arrived, but they were arriving slowly. However, Marshal Blucher led an attack, losing a lot in progress. In the south, the coalition would try their hand at an unwanted attack with a heavily fortified French town. They would lose a lot in progress, and Marshal Bernadottes' army finally arrived, but cannon fire halted their advance. The Prussians would lead a surprise attack, and they would succeed. Thousands of Saxon soldiers would come and surrender. The coalition pushed the French back in the north, pressing them from all sides. In the south, they were still fighting for a heavily fortified French town, but nothing much happened the rest of that day. Under the cover of night, Napoleon would try his best at marching his men through a bridge outside the city, trying to retreat. When it reached dawn, the coalition realized, and they launched an all-out attack on the French city. The coalition were assaulting the French town. Most of the French were already retreating. That wasn't until the bridge was blown early due to engineers packing it with dynamite to blow it up behind them. But it was blown too early, and so many French soldiers were stuck on the wrong side of the bridge. Napoleon was defeated. His army had to retreat. They retreated all the way to the border of France. The coalition would later dissolve the Confederation of the Rhine, and German states would side with the coalition, along with the Illyrian provinces, which sided with Austria due to revolution. It was bad days for Napoleon. But in his later campaign, he would prove himself to still be the master of Europe. But that is a story for another time.